Hola amigos y bienvenidos al capítulo 3. Hello everyone and welcome back to chapter 3. I'm really excited to share this video with you, and typically this is the point where I can really see my students really begin to become Spanish speakers and begin to really use their Spanish in very useful, creative, and impressive ways. And I hope that at this point in this chapter you guys can join and become a part of my Spanish journey, and I will begin to learn things from you as well. So let's take a look at what we'll be talking about in chapter 3. I'll try and make this quick, and then I'm going to go right into teaching you guys about AR verbs and show you the way that I teach conjugation and AR verbs in class. In this chapter, I'm hoping that you will be able to recognize some verbs through context and reading, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to tell the difference in between the three main types of verbs and be able to conjugate them even if you don't know exactly what these verbs mean. I want to teach you about a rule called a personal. It's something that we don't have in English, and it's a very key part of being able to speak fluently. And I'm going to also in this chapter teach you about irregular verbs, why they are important, and as extra credit, be able to help you use ing, the present progressive, and some gerunds where our verbs are acting as nouns. It sounds complicated, but it's something very easy to do if we do a good job with the first part. And at the very end of this chapter, before we do our reading, I'm hoping you guys will be able to look at a sentence that has more than one verb in it and be able to write some really impressive high-level sentences. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you guys a few notes from the book about how to recognize a verb in a sentence and how to start thinking about how to apply these new verbs into the sentences that we're going to try and start to write now. So I'm going to go ahead and say before I begin that it's super important to take a look at this book. I don't think there's a Spanish teacher among us that hasn't ever used the book 501 Verbos or 500 Verbos. It is a very useful book, and it fits really, really well with what we're learning here in chapter 3. So it's my goal that at the end of chapter 3, that not only you know all the verbs that I'm sharing with you that I think is important, but that you'll be able to use this book as a tool to teach yourself new verbs and to understand new verbs that you encounter in your Spanish journey. So if you can't quite get 500 verbos, here is a useful verb list that I like to use, and it will work well with the chapter that we have here, but it isn't quite like 500 verbos where it already has the conjugations. That will be some work that you'll have to complete on your own. Let's start by reviewing our basic sentence pattern and use some sentences we can already write pretty easily to expand it to the new verbs that we're going to learn in this chapter. So in general, looking at a normal sentence, something like the boy is tall, we see that we have our subject here in red, el niño, we have our verb in blue, es, and we have a predicate describing what's going on here as alto in green. So if we were going to change a part of this sentence and add a different verb, not talking about how the boy is, but we could replace this blue verb, the blue part of the sentence, with a new verb that we're going to learn how to use here. If we're thinking about a question, remember we usually go our question word here, like who, our verb next, and then the subject last. So it'll be this part of a question that we will substitute with new, more exciting and interesting verbs. So ideally, if you're looking at a sentence like from chapter 2, los profesores tienen muchos alumnos. This should say alumnos, not alumnus. I think I got some autocorrect here. This says the teachers have many students. So I want you to be able to take away this verb, tienen, and replace it with a verb like enseñan, and notice how the ending of these are kind of similar. So now we see the teachers something many students, or a lot of students. So what might the teachers do for the students? Or what verb, what action might the teachers take on the students? So looking here, we know that it's the teachers who's doing it by the conjugation. You can learn what the conjugation should be for something like ellos, ellas, los, or las. And you might be able to figure out that this word is teach. So this says the teachers teach many students. All right, in the next video, you guys, I'm going to explain AR verbs, and I am going to give you guys a chance to use some of these verbs in sentences with some of the adjectives you know and the question words to do some really impressive things. So go ahead and watch the next video if you want more practice on how to use these verbs.